In September 2020, there was groundbreaking news of the change of use class, and I want to know how that, from both of your POVs, I want to know how that affected your way of business, and if actually it turned out to be a positive. Do you want to start on that, or?
Well, I'd just like to say 2020, I'm sure for Strettons was a bigger year with COVID and people not going into offices. I'm sure that was a bit
It was a
more...
real shot in the arm for what the industry needed, because the industry was on its knees. It was really concerning. You know, we were kneecapped in terms of being able to do viewings first and foremost. We were, you know, going into London. A colleague of mine was stopped by the police one day and, you know, why are you coming in? You know, this is for, you know, essential workers only in construction. We were playing the card, well, we're going to go to a construction site, but it was every single hurdle that could have been put in our place was there. And it was so groundbreaking, the COVID, because I speak to certain clients who say, well, we've been through 3 or 4 recessions in our lifetime, it will always bounce back. But COVID is something that is not a recession based, it's not a financial implication, it's a worldwide, it's a social thing more than anything. So in September 2020, when Class E came in, I thought that was a great move by the government, because for so long we would be speaking about certain buildings. We say, oh, could this work, you know, for a gym, for nursery, for religious use? But then straight away you're thrown in, well, subject to planning. And planning is a dark art at the best of times. But the uncertainty for, let's say, education providers, we know that they need to hit a certain start time based on term times. You can't expect someone to take over 20,000 square feet on the hope that planning might come in on that date. We don't know if there's going to be 106s related to that. So the ability to be able to move fluidly between those use classes was immense. We had a good client of ours delivered a scheme in Cambridge Heath, and it was, I don't know whether it was a psychological thing of because it was on the riverfront and people thought, actually, do you know what, I don't want to be right in the mix of things. I want to be slightly retracted. I want to be slightly out of town, let's call it that. But the ability to go into an office building where you could overlook the river and there's people running past and there's green spaces, we were fortunate that companies recognised that as a value, to be, you know, where everyone was shaking hands with their elbows and whatnot. The ability to say to the rest of their team, actually, we're gonna move slightly further out, but we're going to be in an area where you've got open green spaces, canals and whatnot. And it's, you know, we saw it in the office market more so. Outside space, roof terraces became a real key factor. But that site in question, you may remember the Stronghold. And we had an offer on the table, but the planners turned around to us, the internal planners from the client side, and they said, look, we'd love to do the deal, but we have to display 2 years of marketing, we have to do this, we then have to go in for a change of use. And then overnight that changed. So we were able to provide 13,000 square feet to a user that we were basically told 4 months prior would have to wait for 2 years. And that meant that we could allocate a third of the space of the scheme to a user that would have otherwise fit outside of the remit.
All right for some, eh?
Yeah,
I mean,
I've got a difference.
yeah.
So on the surface level, I got it, and it made things simpler. And my opinion was it was more to do with the high street dying. And they didn't know what to do with it. But hey, if everything's E-class, you could put a gym in there, you could put a nursery in there, you can do what you want, and that space won't die. But from my point of view, they actually let me role play this a little bit. I was happily doing deals where, for instance, I have one in Camden where it was about 1,200 square feet of F1 church. And I walked in the building and said, oh, that's fantastic. Hey, let's put an extension on it, double the space. I'll line up a nursery for it, agreement to lease in place, and I can make that building worth £2 million the next day. Needed a load of capex, but it worked. But the moment that E-class or the change in the use class happened, all those deals died because they went and stuck religious education into F1 and even a nursery into E-class. So all those F1 buildings which were D1, suddenly no one would take for obvious reasons. No one would take that risk. Caused me a car crash, and I genuinely panicked. I must have lost about 300 grand's worth of fees overnight. However, in some ways, long term, it's been beneficial to me because it's made F1 even harder to find. They're real unicorns, and the need for my services has literally doubled.
Everyone's going to have different spins on that.
Yeah.
It impacted us as a business negatively. It probably benefited a lot of the sector in comparison, but we're always going to look at it from our perspective rather than
Yeah.
sector wide, I think.